Hello, welcome back to my channel. It's me, SB. So today we are continuing on with our beginner crochet masterclass, or just a beginner crochet class. So what we're going to be working on today is the slip stitch. The slip stitch is typically not used for an entire pattern. Now, you will find some things that do, or some patterns rather, that do use the slip stitch throughout. And I'll show you some examples real quick. Now, these garments are going to be very dense, they're going to be very heavy, and they're going to look very similar to knitting. So this is a good way to get the knit look with crochet. The slip stitch is very difficult to keep your tension consistent, but once you get there, you can make some very beautiful things out of it. So like always, we are going to start with a slip knot. So work the slip knot whichever way you'd like, and I do have a video on working a slip knot a couple of different ways, which I'll leave up there in the iCard and in the description box. So now we are going to work a chain stitch, which once again, I do have a video on how to work a chain stitch. So if you haven't seen that video, please go check that out. Practice that and then come back here. So once again, there will be a video in the description box. So I'm just going to work a chain. I'm not going to work a very big swatch. So just like with the single crochet, we are going to skip the first chain. So in the second chain from the hook, we are going to slip stitch. So to slip stitch, we are simply going to insert our hook into that chain space, yarn over, and pull through that stitch. Okay, with the slip stitch, there's no other yarn over except for that first initial one. And now we're simply going to pull that second loop that we have on our hook, or the loop that is closest to the hook, through our loop right there. And that is one slip stitch complete. So remember how I said that the slip stitch is very difficult to keep a consistent gauge. So a slip stitch typically has a tendency to get tighter and tighter as you work. So what I like to do after I work one of my slip stitches, I gently tug on the loop that is on the hook now, and just give it a little extra room. And you'll see, like, when we pull through, it tends to tighten this stitch here because this is all part of the same working yarn. So we pull through, just give it a little tug. It doesn't have to be a lot because you don't want your stitches to be gigantic. So once again, going through the next stitch, yarn over, pull through that first loop. We all learn differently and we all kind of think about things differently. So sometimes I might say the first loop and I'm really talking about the second loop. So excuse me, sometimes my brain gets a little muddled. But as you can see here, I'm just working across my chain, working slip stitches. And we're going to do this all the way across. So this is a good way to practice keeping your slip stitches consistent. And I'm not very good at keeping my slip stitches consistent because I don't work them very often, you know, for a full pattern or anything. I tend to just use them, like I said, either to get across to another area where I'm wanting to work, or in working in the round. So here's my last stitch. And here is what I created. And you'll notice that your piece will start to kind of do this little curly thing. This is because the slip stitch likes to get tight. So I usually just give it a little tug and it'll kind of loosen up those stitches. So in order to work another row of slip stitches, we're simply going to chain one. And you, by all means, you can eliminate that chain one and just turn, but I personally like to have it there because sometimes that first stitch gets lost. So we're going to turn and look at this. To me, when I first started, this was crazy looking because, I mean, it doesn't look like your typical like crochet stitches. To me, this looks more like knitting. Like whenever you look at the back of a knit piece, those are purls. So to me, this looks like purl stitches. But if we kind of look at the top here, you can see the top of our slip stitches. So that's typically what I do. I usually turn it to where I can actually see the little V. So that way I know where to work. Okay. And I suggest that you keep your tension hand here kind of loose, because like I said, this likes to get very, very tight. And I'm going to locate that first stitch, which is right here, and I'm going to insert my hook underneath both loops. So hopefully you're getting that. Yarn over, pull through. We have 2 loops on the hook. Pull through that first loop. And that is 1 slip stitch complete. Once again, looking at the top, making sure to go through both loops. Yarn over, pull through that first loop. And we're just going to continue in that manner going all the way across. So I'll check back in whenever I get a few more rows completed. Okay, so real quick, something that I forgot to mention is when you reach the end of a row, you may have a little difficulty finding that last stitch. And I know that's where I struggled a lot whenever I was a beginner, was always skipping this last stitch. So just really pay attention to your stitch count. Count as you are working. I know it's easy to say. I know I don't do it all the time. And this is where I always like screw up. So I typically like to take my thumb and my index finger and just give that a little squeeze. And sometimes it makes the stitch just pop out a little bit and then you can see it. So this one always gives me trouble. So I just kind of be patient and, you know, use my fingers to move it through. And that is the second row complete. As you can see, it is really, really short. If you paid attention to this single crochets, this stitch is about half a stitch smaller than a single crochet. So let's chain 1 and turn. And look how crazy it looks. To me, this looks like nothing. I mean, it doesn't look like it's working up at all. So once again, I take in this case, it's going to be my middle finger and my thumb, and I just kind of give it a squeeze on the side, and it kind of makes those stitches pop out a little bit more. So that's a good little tidbit. That's at least what I learned throughout my years of crocheting. And you'll know if your stitches are too tight because you can't put your hook in there. So you saw on this stitch here where I had a little bit of trouble And what happened was it tightened up this stitch here. Look how tight that is now compared to the first one. So I'm just going to back up. I'm going to pull this out just a little more, and I'm going to try to be more mindful of my tension here. There we go. That's a little better. So next one. This stitch is going to take a lot of patience and restraint. This is why I don't like working with slip stitches throughout an entire pattern. For one, I get very impatient, and I want to work it up as quickly and as efficiently as possible, I guess I should say. And slip stitches are not any of that. But like I said earlier, you can make some beautiful things out of this stitch. I've seen people make so pretty, like such pretty gloves and hats, and I can only imagine how long it took them to do. I don't have that patience. I have a work in progress box that is full of things that I need to complete because I get bored. And to me, a slip stitch is a pretty boring stitch. It takes forever. This is row 3 of slips, nothing but slip stitches. So let me grab my other example here. So if you take a look at this, now this was used with a bigger hook, so keep that in mind. So if we compare, this is 3 rows of slip stitches. This right here is 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows. You see 3 rows is compared to like 1.5 of a single crochet. Mind you, this was made with a larger hook size. So yeah, insane. So I'm going to continue on, and we'll take a look at what it looks like the further we go. So another little tidbit that I have for you whenever you are working slip stitch only patterns, what I suggest is you pull out a length of yarn so that way you're not having to pull it out of the ball like we usually do, you know, where there's a lot of tension on your working yarn coming from the ball. You know, every so often just go through and just pull it out and just have it sitting there, so that way it makes it easier, so there's not so much tension on your working yarn. And this is 6 rows, by the way. So I'm going to work up to 10. I have 4 more to go. I'll be right back. So this is typically what your piece is probably going to look like. It's going to look a little, you know, kind of bowed a little bit. When we work a slip stitch, so I'm just going to work this first one. If you really pay attention to the first loop that is on our hook, whenever we yarn over and pull through, this stitch here tends to get tighter. And sometimes we don't realize that it's happening. So we pull through and this loop here starts getting tighter and tighter. And what happens as we continue working on, I don't know if you saw that, but this loop, whenever I put a little bit more tension right here, got tighter. And as you can see, now both of my loops are pretty tight. And then I'm going to pull through again, and that first loop there got smaller. So that's what I was talking about when I said that when we're working these slip stitches, we have to really keep our tension kind of loose, because if we start tightening up on our tension, you see I just tightened it up and I pull through, this whole stitch gets ultra tight. So I hope you saw that, but I'll do it again. So I'm going to pull through and I'm going to keep some tension on here, and then I'm going to pull through again. And did you see how tight that stitch just got? So we have to keep that in mind when working these. And you can kind of tell where my tension gets a little wonky. You see on the ends here, typically my tension is a lot looser on the end stitches. I mean, that's just the way it works out for me. And as I work towards the center of our work here, my tension gets tighter. But we can kind of fix that. We can cheese it a little bit by just pulling our work a little bit and helping those stitches relax. And you know, that's where blocking comes in handy. Blocking can fix a lot of these like funky looking issues, but it's not a miracle worker. So just keep that in mind when you're working these. Okay, so as you can see, it already looks a little better after just tugging on it a little bit. So after that long spiel, let's see if we can count our rows in slip stitches. In my opinion, slip stitches, counting them row-wise is very difficult. Like, I struggle with this. But as you can see, you get little ridges on here, so it makes it a little easier. So let's see if we can count them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. See, that's only 7. But I should have 10 rows. These are really, really difficult to count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I hope you kind of saw how I did that. But the ridges are not one row. It's actually 2. So if we really like pull our stitches apart, you can kind of see where each row is. So just keep that in mind. This is very ridgy, so typically each ridge is going to be 2 rows. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way is, like I said, just pull it apart a little bit and you can kind of see the rows. I struggle with this one a lot. And it's only because I don't practice enough. And if I practiced more, I would get better at identifying the rows. But here it is. So next time you see a crochet project like on Instagram or TikTok or even YouTube or wherever you happen to get your inspiration from, and you see something like this, now you'll know that this is a slip stitch pattern. Now this stitch looks really neat whenever you work it through the back loop, because it really does look like ribbing, like knit ribbing. And we'll go through that in the next video. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful and I didn't waffle too much like I typically do, but I hope it was helpful and informative and you continue on your crochet journey. So yeah, happy crafting, happy crocheting. I'll see you next time. Bye!